don't forget. And we'll get the Facebook live stream set up. Share on a page I manage. I accidentally shared these to my own timeline on accident once, which actually worked out. A lot of friends and family watched, so, but we're gonna do it to the SciStarter page. All right, it's preparing our live stream. So folks, as you come on in, feel free to say hello in the chat. If you already have a burning question about rain, you can, I guess that's kind of an oxymoron, right? Because rain would put out the fire. But if you already have a burning question, you can put it in the chat for us. So I'm going to say, make it count Monday, CoCoRaHS, take a deep dive into precipitation. And we're going to go live. And that actually, I think, answers one of the main questions I have from folks for events. They always ask, will this event be recorded? Yes, and the recording will be available during and after the event because it's a Facebook live stream. I'll put that link in the chat for you all just so you have it to reference. All right, and we are live. Deja, do you want to get us started?
Sure, why not? Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Make It Count Monday. It's everybody's favorite weekly live stream show where we talk about citizen science. Thank you all for tuning in with us again this week. This week, we are going to be talking about all things precipitation. But before we get started, we will have Caroline talk to us about how exactly we navigate SciStarter to find projects like CoCoRaHS.
Awesome. Thank you, Deja. So I'm going to share my screen. And for friends watching on Facebook, you can follow along as well. And for our friends in the Zoom room, go ahead and type scistarter.org/NCSU-home. You can also type in scistarter.org/NCSU and it'll direct you. That's a secret, but you can do that as well. And if you do that, you'll be directed to this page. And this is kind of your one stop for all things citizen science. There are links to the Citizen Science Club at NC State, the NC State Libraries, the Citizen Science Campus main website, as well as an email where you can get help for all your citizen science and campus questions for NC State. This show is supported by SciStarter and the NC State University Citizen Science Campus. And we do it every week. And we're experimenting a little bit this semester where for folks who are in the Zoom room with us, at the end, you can raise your hand using the Zoom question and we'll promote you to panelist. So you can ask our featured guest any question about the project or about citizen science in general, or maybe something about the subject matter. It's a special opportunity that we have for you all. And we do that at the close of every show. So I think that's a real impetus for why you should register on Zoom for these. And you can find all that info at scistarter.org/NCSU-home. So on this page, you can make your SciStarter account. If you're a student, staff, or faculty of NC State, we ask that you use your NCSU email, but all members of the Wolfpack are welcome. You could be an alum, you could just be a fan, you could be in the North Carolina community, or you could be outside of it. There's something for everybody with these events, and I think everybody stands to learn something. Featured on this page is also a tutorial, an Introduction to Citizen Science module. It's meant to be accessible to all different levels. You don't have to know anything about citizen science, or you can be a citizen science expert. You'll learn something from this tutorial. There are videos, there are quiz questions, you get a certificate at the end. It's a lot of fun, and we have it featured on this page for you. We also have featured projects. So there's the Crowd the Tap project, the Spiral Graph project, and after this event, we're actually going to be adding the CoCoRaHS project. So you can get special instructions just for the Wolfpack community to get started in this project with some special links. I'm waiting till after this event because I have a feeling Sean's going to share some links during his presentation. I can tailor it just for you all and include it in the follow-up email. There are also lists that different members in the NC State community have created that you can explore. Lists are collections of projects and different things in the citizen science universe, and recordings of past Make It Count Mondays are available as well. So as you can see, there's a lot here, a lot to discover, and we made it just for you. We made it in partnership with you. Citizen science is public engagement in real research. So it means it's a partnership between researchers and people who are curious, concerned, and motivated to make a difference. And anyone can be a citizen scientist. We do these weekly live chats so we can satisfy our own curiosity with special guests like Sean from CoCoRaHS. And so we can make sure that you all have a place where you can come together, even in an online format, to learn something new, ask questions, and hopefully have fun. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and pass the mic back to Deja.
Thanks, Caroline. All right, everybody. So we are now into that part of the show where we're trying one of those new things out. And we did it last week and we're bringing it back this week. And now it's time for icebreakers for our special guest to help us introduce the topic. So this week we are talking about all things precipitation, weather, and atmosphere with our special guest, Sean Heuser. Sean is the CoCoRaHS State Coordinator from the NC North Carolina Climate Office. He was born right here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and joined the State Climate Office team in 2008 as an EcoNet technician. Sean holds a Bachelor of Science in Atmospheric Science with a minor in mathematics from UNC Asheville and a Master of Science in Atmospheric Science from NC State University in 2010. So now to help us introduce today's topic of this crazy weather, I mean, we have been having some crazy weather lately. We are going to hop into this little icebreaker called Inquiring Minds Want to Know. And so the first thing that our inquiring minds, aka our audience, would like to know is, did 10-year-old you ever imagine that you would be working with this topic?
Yes. And you ask most meteorologists, usually when they're kids, they find something about it that just makes them curious about it, and it's just a lifelong passion after that. So yeah, right around 9 or 10 years old, I knew this was what I wanted to do.
And so what was it about, meteorology or atmospheric science or the weather? Like, what was it that got you excited about this topic?
So I would have to say 2 events in my childhood in the Raleigh area. And if people are from this area, they'll probably know these really well. One was in 1996, Hurricane Fran, where we got, it was the first really major hurricane of my lifetime that came through the Raleigh area, and not having to deal with the aftermath. That was just incredible, looking at the force of a Category 3 hurricane that came through. Just imagine if it was worse. But the other one, which is also precipitation related, is January 2000, the we call busted forecast for snowfall in this area, where they only called for a couple of inches of snow, but we got a couple of feet of snow during that event. So just the trying to learn more about how to forecast and just all that snow, which, being here in North Carolina, if you're not familiar with having that much snow, you really don't know what to do. So fortunately, having parents from the north, it was pretty easy to, they told me pretty quickly what to do, which was grab a shovel and start digging out. So those 2 things were really what really got me into this field, and it just continues to amaze. Things happen now. It's just nothing's the same every day. You get something different every day doing this.
Now that I can definitely believe. So I'm curious to know, what is your favorite fun fact about the weather?
So my favorite fun fact, if I had to pick one, it has to do with precipitation in North Carolina. And that fun fact is that the wettest spot in North Carolina and the driest spot in North Carolina are about an hour away from each other, both in the mountains. So your driest spot is actually Asheville, North Carolina, on an annual basis. They get the least amount of rain. And then if you go about an hour southwest to Lake Toxaway, that is the wettest spot in the state on average. And that difference is usually in the neighborhood of 55 to 60 inches a year in terms of precipitation difference. So it's a really interesting fact, just to look at the different climates that close to each other.
Yeah, that is actually mind-blowing. And I feel like one of my favorite, I guess, like weather facts, I'm not even sure if it's a fact or if it was just somebody's opinion and they told me about it. But they said here in North Carolina, we get more rain than Seattle. Is that true?
Parts of North Carolina, yes. So Lake Toxaway would be one of them. Yeah, the myth is that it always rains in Seattle. I can attest, I've been there twice. For 2 total weeks, it's rained 1 day in the 2 weeks I've been there. So they do not get rain all the time. It's cloudy a lot there, but they do not get rain all the time. And so, yeah, it's true. Like there are parts of North Carolina where it is wetter than Seattle.
Okay, it's good to know. Good to know. I would say that's definitely the fun fact that I whip out to all my family and friends. Like, actually, did you know that it's actually very wet and rainy? And I thought it was Raleigh specifically, but now I know exactly where I can tell them. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Now, I must ask, inquiring minds want to know, what is your favorite type of cloud and why?
If I had a personal preference, it'd be no clouds. But because I like being outdoors, so which no clouds is great in the winter. It's not that great in the summer. But if I had to pick a year-round cloud, I would honestly, and this may sound very gloomy of me, but I prefer stratus clouds. Just gives you a nice shade. I do a lot of sports outdoors, and so not having to stare up in the sun or have to wear sunglasses all the time when I'm like running or playing tennis or doing anything outdoor wise. I kind of just enjoy it. It's a nice shade for the day as long as it's not raining. But nice layer of stratus clouds is never a bad thing.
And so for our audience that may not be familiar with the technical terminology, which type of cloud would that be? How would you describe it?
So stratus clouds are these low-level, very gray, mundane clouds. In the winter, you see them all the time. They're not your poofy cotton ball cumulus clouds. They're not your thin streaking high layer cirrus clouds or your thunderstorm clouds, which are cumulonimbus. Stratus are like the very boring type of clouds, but I enjoy them as someone who likes to go outdoors a lot. It's nice shade, and usually it's not too hot when there's stratus clouds out.
Okay. I would definitely say my favorite would have to be the storm clouds, the
cumulonimbus. Yeah. Those are very popular among meteorologists, especially those who like to go chase storms. Like those are the ones they're looking for. That's just not for me.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a storm chaser, but I think the clouds are pretty. Yeah. All right, so just a few more questions here. If you had to pick rain, snow, or hail?
Snow.
Okay.
Not even close.
All right, and our last question that we have for our Inquiring Minds Want to Know segment, I want to know, how did you get involved with the CoCoRaHS project?
Yeah, so the CoCoRaHS project is I guess for our office, many years ago, one of the state coordinators, because I'm not the only coordinator in our state, there's 3 of us, needed some extra help. And it was a great chance for our office to really get involved in this project, citizen science project. We do a lot of work with schools and usually kind of tie in CoCoRaHS to that. So somebody in our office was appointed a co-coordinator, and as that person tends to, if they leave for another job or they no longer working for us, that position kind of gets changed around. And so that's kind of how I got involved into it. Was there was an opening for it, and I do a lot of work with weather instruments already, so it's just another way to kind of tie that in and get familiar with another set of weather data.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for opening up the ice with us in this icebreaker segment. So I guess I was jumping in ahead of myself because we didn't even talk about what CoCoRaHS is as a project. So could you tell us, what exactly is CoCoRaHS? What does this acronym stand for?
Yeah, so CoCoRaHS is an acronym for Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. So this does not just measure rainfall. We also measure hail. We measure snowfall. This is it's a nationwide project. Actually, it actually originated in Colorado at Colorado State University back in 1998. The year before, they had a major flood. Did not have a lot of observations in the Fort Collins area for precipitation, so it's very difficult for them to kind of pinpoint where the maximums for precipitation were, or even to figure out stream flow and other things that rainfall really kind of ties into. So this was a way for citizens to get involved into making daily measurements of precipitation. And so it started out there and it just expanded throughout time. And now it's in all 50 states and even in a few countries. So This program basically is a daily observation where citizens can get a rain gauge, make their measurements once a day. It helps out a number of different users, such as the National Weather Service, emergency management. I know city utilities will use this kind of data to help with their work. Farmers, of course, love the fact having a rain gauge on site a lot of times gives them a good indication of how much rain's falling in the area. I know teachers use it a lot for educational purposes, and I know the CoCoRaHS website has a lot of good resources, excuse me, for that. So all sorts of different uses for this precipitation data. I know we use it here in the office a lot to help with our network of weather stations, which are separate of CoCoRaHS, but it helps us kind of do a little basic quality control on our data to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
So why is it important that this project exists? So if CoCoRaHS was never in existence, what would we be missing?
So the biggest thing we'd be missing is when we have these huge tropical systems come through. This is just one example. So one example that we noticed, and it was a recent example, when Hurricane Florence came through a couple years ago, it was CoCoRaHS gauges that really pinpointed where the maximum amount of precipitation was, and it helped emergency managers really determine, okay, these rivers are getting the flood stage, but how bad are they going to get the flood stage? Because there are significant gaps in weather data. A lot of weather networks are not at that scale, very small scale, like CoCoRaHS can be based on population areas. Our network, the EcoNet that you mentioned earlier, it's 43 stations across the entire state of North Carolina. It's designed to be in areas that there's not a lot of foot traffic. There's not a lot of development. The same with a lot of these federal stations like ASOS, which is Automated Surface Observing Stations, which are usually at airports. So there's not a lot of development there. They're usually in open areas. And that gives you a sense of the general climate. But if you're looking for these pockets of heavy precipitation events, especially in urbanized areas, that's where CoCoRaHS really comes in. And so for Hurricane Florence, yeah, there was big precipitation maximum in the southeastern US. And I'll show a little bit of that later after our demo, kind of show how this data gets used. But that was one of the big areas for that. The other thing that's really good for is snowfall. There aren't a lot of networks that measure the amount of snowfall. And so CoCoRaHS observers can really help determine where these maximum of snowfall are, especially in the western part of the state where there's a lot of mountain peaks and valleys, and really depending on where you live depends on how much snowfall you're going to get. So that is a huge bonus for us when we're looking at winter events. Okay, we know this area got a lot of snow. That snow eventually is going to have to melt, and so when it melts, you've got it going into the soil, and then you've got it going into streams and runways. So you have to be careful about potential flooding or elevated stream levels going forward. So, this is it's an amazing resource. And you talk to any meteorologist or even climatologist who has access to this data, you can look at this data, they love it. It's great. It provides a lot of information that helps in the future for forecasting or even to do research projects to fill in gaps that other weather station areas may not have.
Very cool. And I guess I just had a question that popped into my mind when you mentioned that they, help with all these research projects all over the state. Do you know, is there any research, I guess, with CoCoRaHS rain gauges close to the coast and anything related to, I guess, climate change and sea level rise? I don't know.
If there is, I don't know of it yet. Like I said, I just became the coordinator back in November. So this is still getting spun up a little bit on what's being done. I will say though, we have seen a lot of reports. I know when we did our analysis of Hurricane Florence, that CoCoRaHS data was imperative for us to fill in some gaps. Like we have 2 stations on the coast, and one failed because power went out. And so when you have no power for a couple of our stations, the station just goes dead. We had another one that was we thought was right in the bullseye area, but you can only do so much as a meteorologist to make sure that, or even a technician to make sure that station's up and running properly before the storm. What happens when the storm happens, it's kind of out of your hands. And so that's what happened at one of our other sites where the rain gauge stopped working during the storm, which was like the one thing we didn't want to stop working during the storm. So having this extra data set was huge for us to figure out where these pockets of heavy precip were, so that way we could see, okay, where's potential for flooding or potential for, storm surge. Okay, we got the storm surge coming in. Plus, we've had this extra 2 feet of rain. Now we've got even more issues. So, and we're probably going to see more and more research in the future with this. I don't know necessarily about sea level rise because we're looking at precipitation itself, but precipitation, just seeing these precipitation patterns, we're getting more heavy rain events, we're getting more rain, period. How is that affecting the land, especially near the coast where there is a lot of agriculture? And what you don't want is you don't want a lot of rain to wash out the crops, of course, but you also don't want saltwater intrusion to really play a role too if you're clearing out areas for saltwater to get in.
Wow, so much important data and information that's being used for the CoCoRaHS project. Like, it's really blowing my mind. And I guess with that, I'd really love to see how exactly we can participate in CoCoRaHS.
Sure. So you will need to purchase something. Like it is citizen science, but it's a small purchase. I was actually talking to Carolyn earlier, and I was telling her that if you go to CoCoRaHS.org and you go down on the bottom left, you could see the store, and they're actually running a sale right now. So shameless plug. But anyway, here's a CoCoRaHS gauge. They're normally $40. They're currently on sale for $32.75. I just found that out like 10 minutes before we came on air. So, so this is your basic CoCoRaHS gauge. And so what you would want to do is find a space on your property that's far enough away from trees, buildings. You don't want anything to obstruct the gauge because you want to make an accurate measurement of precipitation. So, so your gauge right here is basically a funnel on top. You have an inner tube on the inside there, and then you have an outer tube. And basically, this whole gauge itself can hold about 12 inches of water total, 12 to 13 inches, depending on your measurement. So basically, as the rain falls through, let me see if I can actually have one. Yeah. All right. So after you set it up and you're ready to make measurements, let's say there are 2 ways you can measure precipitation using one of these gauges. So one's by rain, and the other instance is snow. So I'll start with rain because that seems to be, at least in the eastern half of the state, all we're getting this winter. And as a snow lover, I'm not bitter or anything. So, so let's say rain happens. All right, so we got a little rain right here. There, so we have a little rain. I don't know if you can see on the screen there. We got a little water there in there. So every day, they ask that you make the measurements at 7 a.m. We usually between 6 and 8 a.m. is good for us. The reason why is because there's another network called Co-op, which is Cooperative Observer Program. Their daily stations are at 7 a.m. So they want to keep it consistent with your cooperative observers as well. So we have our gauge here. And so after it rains, we'll go look. So in this case right here, you also want to make sure it's level. So I'm gonna make sure it's level first. And then we've got about 57 hundredths of an inch of rain. And it's important that decimal, you don't round up, you don't round down, exact measurement. It's important to know that, 0.50 and 0.57 are different. Not only by 0.07, but like when you're looking at total rainfall for the year, it accumulates over time. So in an instance like this, you'd make the measurement and then you would just dump the water out afterwards. In the event you get more than an inch, that's what the outer edge is for. So I'm gonna give us some more rain. So, all right, so as you can see now, I've got a little extra rain down here at the bottom. And so I don't have a sink in here. Unfortunately, I didn't think this through all the way. So basically what you would do is you would measure, the inner tube is an inch. So what you would do is you would also make that measure, make sure it's an inch. You would then dump that out. You would then take the funnel and the inner tube out and then use whatever's in the outer tube and pour it into the inner tube, make that measurement, dump it out, add it all up, and then report. So in this case, it's probably 1.5 inches if I was eyeballing it, but don't eyeball these, actually make actual measurements. We want them to be as accurate as possible. So that is pretty much how you do rain. In the event of, I will say, so there's a lot of single day measurements, but you can also do a multi-day measurement. So you could do it, so let's say you go on vacation. This isn't something that reporting your day is great, but I know people like to go on vacation or they forget one day. It's perfectly acceptable. But there is a way on the website, and I can go through it here in a minute after the demo, to do a multi-day accumulation. So you would say, okay, I got 1.5 inches of rain, but this is over a 3-day period. And so that way we get a sense of, okay, this wasn't in one day, and it doesn't fail the quality control process coming through, because you may report a 1.5 inch rainfall for one day, but it didn't rain that day. It rained 2 days ago. So you got to make sure you know, hey, this is a multi-day measure. So there's your rainfall. It's pretty straightforward. It's really important. So a follow-up question on the rainfall part before I go to my snow example. No? All right. All right. Snow's a little different. There are two ways you can measure snow. You can measure it by snow depth by using a snowboard, or you can do what we call snow water equivalent, which is you actually use your CoCoRaHS gauge to measure the snow water equivalent. So I'm going to start with basically to do snow depth, you need what we call a snowboard. So it's about 12 to 16 inches by 12 to 16 inches, 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch thick. We usually want it to be white, so that way when snow falls, it doesn't melt on the dark surface. And so basically you would put it out somewhere on a flat surface, make your measurements as you're going through using a ruler. So just like in the old days, like you go out there with a ruler, put it in the ground, there's your snowfall measurement. After you make that measurement though, you'd want to wipe the board clean. So an example of a snowboard, see if I can back up and actually show this. It's not an actual snowboard, but something like this that you would put on a flat surface. And as the snow falls, you would go over, make your measurements, and clean out. I will suggest though, if you're gonna do something like this, to put a flag or something in the ground. That way you can know where the board actually is in the event you get a heavy snowfall. So that's one way to do it. The other way is what we call snow water equivalent, which is use your CoCoRaHS gauge. And so if you're using a CoCoRaHS gauge for snow water equivalent, what I would strongly recommend is, and actually they ask you to do this, is to take the funnel. So you want to take out your funnel and your inner tube. So you just have the outer tube to help measure snowfall. And so in this example, I've got some fake snow in the tube here because we haven't had much snow this year. So fake snow in the tube. So let's say I've got my snow out here. I'm out on the gauge. I see, okay, I'm not going to measure this. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to melt this. And so the best way to melt this is to bring it inside. You're going to fill this guy up with a little warm water. Okay, and as you fill it up, make sure you take note of how much warm water you put in there, because that will be important. So after you get your warm water, you pour it in, you melt this guy down, so then you got all water in there. Okay, after all the water is in there, you then put your funnel and your inner tube back together. You pour that, so you pour that into the inner tube, record it again, and then subtract out the warm water that you put in before, and there's your water equivalent. Don't assume a 10 inches. So I'm sorry, let me back up. The normal conversion rate for snowfall to precipitation is 10 inches of snow equals 1 inch of rain. That's a myth. That is, there are times where if you have a wetter snow, it's more snowfall, it's more rain. And then if you have much more fluffier snowflakes, it could be 20 inches of snow equals 1 inch of rain. We just want to know the liquid equivalent. And so that's the best way to do both of those for snowfall. Hail, which is the other one, there's no gauge or anything for the hail. What you want to do is you want to get something called a hail pad, which is basically a big foam pad that hail can hit on there. And then you can pick a piece of hail up, make a measurement of how large diameter it is, or you can take that hail pad and mail it back to the CoCoRaHS people. They will do the analysis for you and then send you a new one. So those are the three types you can do just with CoCoRaHS itself.
That's really interesting. I've never thought about how the different, I guess, consistencies of snow can mean a different amount of.
Yeah, so the fluffy snow is a lot more doable to like clear driveways with than the wet snow. The wet snow turns to ice real quick. So, but yeah, there's a different. So a lot of meteorologists may look at computer models for like liquid water equivalent for 10 snow. A lot of times they do a 10-to-1 conversion, but it really depends on how much moisture is in the air, how, if the air is a little bit drier, you get much fluffier snow. It's going to take a lot more to get an inch of rain. So
So one thing I really like about this project, and I was thinking as you were demoing it, is that you're really learning a lot of the skills that you need like as a scientist. I just, when hearing you and watching you run through this demo, kind of gave me flashbacks to undergrad when I was actually using all these different tools and learning how to read the lines and how to measure water correctly and all these other things. So I think this is really cool because it is something that is, these are transferable skills. And I think this is maybe the most hands-on projects maybe that we've covered on Make It Count Monday thus
It
far.
can be hands-on. If you live in the desert, it's not that hands-on. But I mean, like I said, these are in all states, and so it's very hands-on the last couple of years around here. It's been very wet, so you do get a lot of practice. So
yeah, and I'd be really curious to see what type of data you all get from this winter, because these past couple of weeks have been really crazy.
yeah, it's looking like, right, I think we're an inch away from the wettest winter on record here in Raleigh, and we've got a couple weeks or about a week ago, and so we might get it. I don't know. It's gonna be a photo finish.
Yeah, that it doesn't surprise me at all. So I'm curious, where do your participants input their data?
Yeah, so I guess if you don't mind, I'll share my screen and then kind of show you the rundown on this.
And while I do that, I actually have a quick question because
Yeah.
I know we have a lot of international folks on SciStarter.
Mhm.
CoCoRaHS, it's just North America, right?
For now, it is, yes.
Okay.
I know they're always looking to expand. They're working on that. So for example, this is the website, CoCoRaHS.org. This is where you would go to report your data every day if you were going to report it. So as you can see today, they had 10,243 daily observations, 257 multi-day observations, and then we've got some other observations. Condition monitoring is one that they're starting to get in more into, and this is basically people who have done this for many years. And basically what they'll do is they'll talk about how it is around their area. Is it really wet? Is it really dry? What are some things that are kind of notifying you that it's really wet or dry? For example, like the ground's extremely saturated, or I live on top of a hill and the water's not running off anymore because there's so much of it, or things like that. So so that's really becoming more and more. It's helping people every week who do our drought monitoring, which we haven't had a whole lot of, but when we do have, when it does come back, they use this a lot to kind of determine where the worst the drought could be. But anyway, so on this CoCoRaHS site, you can view data. If you have an account and you have a CoCoRaHS gauge, up here somewhere it would say my data, and you would just click on that, and that's where you would input your data for the day. If it's a multi-day, if it's your daily observation, the amount and what time you made that measurement, because that's important too. It helps them determine, okay, you made a measurement at 7 in the morning, and your neighbor made a measurement at 8 in the morning, and you guys are a little bit off. Maybe they determined it was still raining when you made your measurement, etc. So yeah, so this is the site. And like I said, if you have any questions or you want to know more about you want to get more training, more formalized training, instead of just listening to me do a spiel for a little while, they do have training slideshows over here. They're really good. They go a lot more in depth on snowfall measurements, precip measurements than I was able to do with a 10-minute run today. Education, I know we have a lot of teachers and educators who are on these calls. There's plenty for educators to go through and really get involved with CoCoRaHS.
Awesome. Is there an ideal age range for your CoCoRaHS participants? What does your community of users look like?
So they run the gauntlet. We have plenty of younger kids to all the way to very to the more elderly community who are, they just want to, they have that itch to be a science to get themselves involved in science. And so we don't really I'll stop sharing my screen here for a second. We don't really take those kind of metrics in terms of the age group. I will say basically when you register, they do ask if you're under 18 or not, but that's it. They don't ask, like, as far as I know, they don't ask, because I get the notifications when a new observer does come in. I do get those notifications. So I do know where people are signing up, but that's it. But it's great though. Like, we've done a lot of work with schools in the past, and we know it's a good way for them, especially the elementary school age group, where weather is part of their curriculum. It is great to get them involved early on. This is how you make a measurement. This is, your measurement's important here. And so that's kind of where we're based in. But I do know there's plenty of runs the gauntlet for all ages.
So I see we have a question in the Q&A box here. The question is, are there instructions for choosing a specific rain gauge location? Should they be 10 feet away from a structure, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, excuse me. So you need to be about 2 times height of the obstruction. So at least for these rain gauges. So if your building's 10 feet tall, it'd be great if you're about 20 feet away. And we do this so that the wind doesn't play a role. If you want to put it on a fence post that's far enough away from things, just make sure that your gauge is high enough above the fence post that it doesn't cause some sort of draft where the rain could actually go over the gauge and not in the gauge. But for the most part, 2 times the height of the obstruction is great. It's a little bit different for other instruments, but for rain, it should be perfect. Don't put it under a tree. Don't put it, next to your house. Like, be far enough away so that your values aren't affected by other things.
So technically, those of us who live in apartments can't participate in CoCoRaHS?
You can. So one way you can do it. So like I said, this is great for urban settings. If you get access to your roof, you can always put it on top of your building. I know our building here at NC State, we have one on top of our building. We don't record or anything. It's usually it's to help test some of our other sensors. But a lot of businesses, if they can get to the roof of their building, they can put one up. If you can work with your apartment community to see, hey, if we find some open space to put this somewhere, hopefully it's an area where it's safe and nobody can mess with it. Those kind of things. You can make it work. It's not ideal to put it on, in an apartment, not ideal to put it on your deck or anything like that. You're more than welcome to, but again, though, that would be something where your data would probably be under some scrutiny based on kind of how it's based, depending on the wind, how hard it's raining, etc.
I can quickly jump in and say there are places that you wouldn't think of that would be really good hosts for a rain gauge. I know I'm moving to an apartment later this year. I'll probably put my rain gauge at my local library. I've been to it was funny, Sean, you mentioned being in the desert. I actually know a library in Gilbert, Arizona. They were CoCoRaHS maniacs. And they were indeed in the desert, and they did have a rain gauge. But you could have it at your local library. If you're part of a church, you could put it at your church. If your church is okay with it. Or your local community center. Whatever group you're a part of, if they have a physical space, they could potentially, be a host for your rain gauge.
Absolutely. And that's important. I mean, like I said, those are areas that, people will go to. And so it's great to know, hey, at my church, it rained, 2 inches, even though I live, 10 minutes down the street, didn't rain at all. So it's great, to work with those groups to find a space for your rain gauge.
Yeah, and thank you so much for mentioning that as well, Caroline, because I think that's an awesome way to just engage your community. If you have to use it at another location, you can get even more people involved in the project and get them learning about rainfall and precipitation and all of that. So I think that's great. I had a few more questions for you, and I'm wondering, are there any resources, like if there were school groups or educators wanted to get a rain gauge for their school and they want to host a project there? Are there any resources for that, or any grants or things like that that teachers
so in North Carolina, we get those offers every once in a while. We kind of take it on a case by case basis, but if they want to email our office, we're happy to try either help or facilitate a way to make that happen. We're always interested in education. It's one of our missions in our office, and so for us, it's a way for us to kind of help at least get that process going, and that curiosity spun up a little bit. So yeah, we're always willing to at least get a conversation started and see what we can do.
So I'm curious how long does it take? I guess, like, what's the turnaround time with the data? Once, let's say I have a rain gauge at my house, it rains today. About how long, let's say I put my data in tomorrow morning, how long until that data is useful to you all?
That morning, like it's almost instant. These data points that come in, we'll use them as soon as they come in. They do go through some sort of quality check to make sure they're pretty good, that they're accurate. There's no like extreme outlier that we're like, oh, somebody put in a decimal point wrong, because we've seen that a couple of times where somebody meant to put 0.4 inches of rain, but they forgot the decimal point, so it came in as 4 inches of rain. And so for us, we have to go in and say, no, it's a bad data point, or we can, hey, can you re-enter it as this number? So yeah, it's useful as soon as it comes in.
Do you know if the CoCoRaHS project has any longstanding users? Like, is there a sticker or an award for somebody who's been the longest CoCoRaHS participant?
So I don't know who the longest participant is. I know some other states in the past have done like awards for those who have been for at least 10 years. I just had an email from someone today who's been doing it for 14 years in Durham. So for those kind of things, I know we're working on being a little more engaging with our users who do volunteer, and I mean it is a community effort, so we want to actually congratulate them when they do hit milestones. And so that might be something we look to do in the future. Like I said, there's 3 of us, so we've got for co-coordinators, so we've got to try to talk and figure something out. But that's definitely something that I would like to do going forward as a new co-coordinator, to kind of at least show my appreciation for the people who've done these for many years.
Do y'all ever have like friendly competitions with the other states?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is a great segue. So actually beginning in March, I know we're in a basketball heavy area, so March Madness is always about basketball, but for actually I'm going to share my screen again because I actually have a slide for this. So every year we do something called March Madness, and this is actually run through the National CoCoRaHS organization. So every year, states will compete to see who can get the most new observers during the month of March. So if you're thinking about joining, this is a shameless plug for me, is wait till March 1st to join, because I want to win again this year. We used to run this thing. We won the traditional category, which is most total new observers, 4 of 5 years, from 2011 to 2015. And then a state to the south of us decided they wanted to get serious about it, and they won it for a couple of years. But we're hoping to get back into it. So we were 5th last year, so we're hoping to do more. And the winning state receives the CoCoRaHS Cup. It's a mini Stanley Cup, from what for any hockey fans out there, that's what it's been known to be. And so if you want to be an observer, like I said, go to CoCoRaHS.org, and you can find all the information you need to really get in, be an observer, and try to help us reclaim the CoCoRaHS Cup. There are 2 categories now. There used to only be 1 category, which was just total new observers. I think the smaller states didn't like that, so they do now a total and a per capita. And so we've won the total 4 or 5 years in that 2011 to 2015. We're hoping to get back to the top this year. I think Minnesota are the defending champions, so we're hoping to knock them out this year. So yeah, a little friendly competition. My goal is always just to beat South Carolina, because I know the South Carolina one coordinator really well. So it's a little friendly banter between the 2 of us usually.
Now I have to know, does this cup get passed around from year to year, or is it a new cup?
It gets passed around, from what I understand, it gets passed around from year to year. So it will traverse the state, from what I understand. I have not been in this, so I'd have to ask one of the other co-coordinators who's done it longer. I don't know if they ever received it, or if after we won it for so long, they thought, hey, it's a good idea if we actually made something. And after they made it, we didn't win it anymore. So I don't know if those people in Colorado are jealous, or other states are jealous of our dominance for so long. But last March, nationally, there were over 1,100 new observers. So that was quite an impressive feat. So we're hoping to top that this year. So it goes from March 1st to March 31st. If people are on Twitter, they can follow the CoCoRaHS account. It's at @NC_CoCoRaHS. That we'll post some stuff. Also at NCSCO, which is our office's account. We'll do a lot of CoCoRaHS. We'll do some CoCoRaHS content. We've done it in the past. We've done some funny videos in the past about wrong ways to use gauges and things like that. But we'll try to keep it a little more formal this year.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like tons of fun. I'm really hoping that you win this year. So for all of you all out there in the audience, go ahead and participate in CoCoRaHS so we can help Sean and the team. Get your friends to participate so we can bring that trophy back to North Carolina.
Yeah, great.
So do you have since we're talking about users, do you have any favorite stories from, I guess, like CoCoRaHS participants?
I don't have any. Like I said, I haven't been around. This is like a cop out, but I haven't been around long enough in the position to actually get to know some of these stories. I've seen more interesting stories in the condition monitoring, of course. Like, for example, I was looking at them today, and somebody who does a conditioning monitoring report around here was saying, I can tell it's moderately wet to severely wet because a rescue truck, or I guess like a maintenance rescue truck or whatever, got stuck trying to do a 3-point turn out of the field. So, so he goes, that never happens. So we know we got a problem here. And those kind of things. I know they talked a lot about, in those monitoring reports, you hear funny stories about, like, they're funny anecdotal stories. They don't seem funny at the time when you talk about rising creeks and things like that. But they're like, oh yeah, it had riverfront property for a while, or things like that. And but I haven't heard any, at least not yet. I'll probably hear some after this now about some funny stories regarding CoCoRaHS, but I've yet to hear anything.
Well, that just means we might have to have you back on the show sometime in the future to share those stories with us.
Yeah.
All right. So Caroline dropped in the chat. If you all have any questions, be sure to drop those in the chat now so that we can answer them. We do have our segment of stepping up to the mic, where we allow you all to step up to the mic essentially and be promoted to a panelist so that you all can ask your questions live. If you don't feel like asking your questions live, you can also drop your questions in the chat. I would be curious to know how many of our participants have participated in CoCoRaHS. Are you new to the project? Are you, have you done it before? Have you not done it before? Are you unsure? Like, I think there may be a rain gauge out back, but I'm not really sure if it's a rain gauge.
Yeah, I put a question so it should have popped up on everybody's screen. Have you heard of CoCoRaHS? Think of it in terms of, have you heard of it before this event? Because I mean, if you've been with us this whole time, I think you've heard of it by now. But before this event, had you heard? No, I don't know. Grammar's hard. Anyway, just answer the question, everybody. I'll give you a few more seconds to vote. 3, 2, 1, and in the poll. So it looks like we had some folks who hadn't heard of it before, which is good. We had one person who had, and we have a few people watching on Facebook. So feel free to comment on the Facebook too. Oh, wow, interesting. So someone from a CoCoRaHS observer in West Virginia just asked, how can an observer get into outreach in our area or state?
In West Virginia?
West Virginia.
In West Virginia, that's a great question. By the way, I love West Virginia. That is just a beautiful state to drive through. So, and just hanging out there. I've got family in West Virginia. So what I would recommend doing is going to CoCoRaHS.org. I feel like I'm just always sharing my screen. Sorry about this. Let me exit this real quick, and I will show you a spot on the website where you can actually. So on CoCoRaHS.org, so here's our homepage here. If you actually go to the left side, you'll see somewhere. Maybe not. There should be something that says local coordinators. So for those who aren't admin, I think I'm just an admin, but there should be a local coordinator or state coordinator, volunteer coordinators. There we go. So volunteer coordinators, if you click on that and then click on your state, you should have, so these are different regions. So for West Virginia, for example, these are the different regions. Here's a state coordinator. You can always reach out to Dr. Law there at Marshall. Or there are also different regional coordinators that you can reach out to based on where you live. And so that's what I would want. That's what I would recommend doing if you want to get involved in outreach. Talk to them. They may have some ideas, or they may point you in the right direction.
That is awesome. And I do want to note, so CoCoRaHS is a SciStarter affiliate, meaning that if you make your CoCoRaHS account with the same email address you use to make your SciStarter account, and actually after this event, you'll be able to get instructions about how to do just that on the NC State SciStarter page for all of our friends on Zoom. And for our friends watching on Facebook, I dropped it in the comments over there. But you'll be able to go to your SciStarter dashboard and look and see the number and frequency of your contributions to CoCoRaHS. So that's just a fun thing you can do if you want to be included in our SciStarter collective impact assessment, as well as for yourself if you want to keep track of your contributions on SciStarter. And if you wanted to reach out to folks in your area and maybe do an event, reaching out to folks about CoCoRaHS, you could add that event to SciStarter and use our People Finder to message everybody in your area and invite them to participate. And that's something we even did tonight. We messaged everybody in, the Raleigh area and said, hey, come to Make It Count Monday. We have something really cool going on with CoCoRaHS. We have some more questions in the Facebook comments. Let me pull those up. It's just people talking about how much they love CoCoRaHS. We have somebody who is in upstate South Carolina. They do CoCoRaHS at their home in Belton, and they also do it at their library, the Anderson County Public Library. That's so nice. There are lots of CoCoRaHS fans watching. I love it. Feel the love. Someone asked, where's the coolest location in North Carolina with a rain gauge?
That's subjective. That is a very subjective question. It depends on who you ask. I can make an argument. It depends what kind of rain gauge too. CoCoRaHS rain gauge, yeah, there's plenty on the coast. There are plenty in the mountains. There are plenty in the Piedmont. So I want to make sure all of the regions get some love here. Personally, the coolest spot I've seen a CoCoRaHS rain gauge there's one on Grandfather Mountain. I like visiting up there. So that's nice. The coolest spot where one of our stations is, I'd have to say is a tie. We got a couple on the Parkway, the Blue Ridge Parkway. They're pretty cool to go visit. And we also have one on Bald Head Island. That's really nice. Bald Head Island also does have a CoCoRaHS gauge. I don't think they report though. So I need to get on those people and ask them to start reporting again because it's a cool spot. So.
Awesome. I wonder, it'd be cool if there was like a little challenge. Go take pictures with the rain gauges.
Yeah, we may throw that out there as on Twitter or something. Just like, hey, go take a picture where your rain gauge is, and get a cool shot from it, and put it out there and see what people think. Where do they actually have their rain gauge? So
exactly. Well, it doesn't look like anybody in our audience is being very chatty tonight, but that is okay. I'll just take that to mean that this was an excellent episode of Make It Count Monday, and you answered all the questions, and it was so amazing that everybody knows exactly what they need to do in order to participate in CoCoRaHS.
Yeah.
I do have one last question. So I would say the number one thing we hear from folks at SciStarter, I know Deja, we've both heard this on past Make It Count Mondays, is sometimes people will get in their own way and they'll say, I'm nervous to get started because I'm worried that I'll do it wrong, or I'll mess up the data and I'll ruin the whole project, and then CoCoRaHS will come to an end. What would be your advice to those people?
So this is science, and so being wrong is okay. I've been doing this job for 12 years. I feel like I'm wrong every day at least once. So it's okay. It's part of the learning process. whether you're young, you're old, you're new to measuring precipitation, you've done it for many years, it is okay. The one thing I would always recommend is, record how you're doing things. If you think you're doing things wrong, ask an expert, or ask someone. You don't even have an expert. You can ask someone else who's doing it. Like, this is how I'm doing it. Is it the right way I'm doing it? Or what would you recommend? I don't think I'm doing this right. I'm always, it's like I said, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be wrong. I mean, I tell my technicians here, like, it's okay to be wrong. You're not going to learn if you're never wrong. So that'd be my advice. Like, don't feel nervous about doing it. It's a very fun project. You get a lot of support. There's a huge support group here. I think you've noticed that tonight on the Facebook chats. Huge support group here. They're always willing to kind of tell fun stories or give you advice on, hey, you have a question about where you want to locate your gauge. They'll probably have great advice for you. So that's how I would look at it going forward.
Yeah, I see Deja put in the chat, and one of our attendees as well. It's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to mess up. I love that. Actually, I lied. I have another question. So I was working with a group of students the other day, and I thought one of the educators asked such a good question of the students as they were doing the citizen science project. She said, how do you all think this data will help people? So in the context of CoCoRaHS, what do you think is kind of the wider societal significance of people participating?
So the wider significance, I think it depends. Man, that's a loaded question. From a scientist perspective, we do a lot of our measurements where there's no human interference. And so that's great for getting like the broad scale, like here's what weather is in the broadest scale. But last time I checked, people only really care about the weather where there are people. So having CoCoRaHS in areas where there are lots of people, the societal impact is you're learning so much about what we call the micro scale, the very small scale impacts of a storm coming through. Like, okay, we knew a storm was going to hit, let's say it hits Raleigh. Like, this happens a lot. So there are parts of Raleigh that will get a bunch of rain, and there's parts of Raleigh that will get no rain. We have 2 total stations in Raleigh. So we have one on the west side and one on the south side. There are plenty of people in the north and east side of Raleigh that probably will get hammered with a storm and we won't see anything. But that doesn't mean it didn't rain. So having that impact of more people to give us more data points to help us better understand what's actually happening. That's the societal impact I can see from it as a scientist, as just a citizen of the state of North Carolina or any state that's listening to this. Just having that data point and just you learn more about what's going on in your environment by having it right there where you are. A lot of TV meteorologists get complaints from people going, hey, it's not raining at my house. Why are you telling me it's going to rain? Well, if you got the data to prove it, then I can say, yeah, okay, I was wrong on my forecast. Like, it happens. But understanding your environment based on what happens is, from a citizen standpoint, a good way of looking at the societal impact of this project.
Yes, that is so important. Knowledge is power, y'all. So be empowered by participating in the CoCoRaHS project. And I guess we have one last question as we make our way out of here tonight, and that is, are there any resources that are or advice that you could give to our environmental educators out there who want to use CoCoRaHS as a way to engage communities with weather-related topics?
So I know on the CoCoRaHS site, if you go to the education section, which is on the left side, when you go on the page, there's a link for educators or education. That is a great starting point. They have so many things for depending on if you're a teacher, if you're working in 4-H, which we've done work with in the past, if you work for libraries, if you just want to do outreach in general, that's a great starting point. And then what I would kind of top on that is basically then just kind of talk to community leaders, we talk to extension agents all the time because they talk to the people. So, we kind of relay information to them. They can relay the information to the people. It can work the other way too. The public can go to the extension agent and say, hey, we want to know more about citizen science. We want to know more about how to accurately measure rainfall or snow or hail or things like that. And then we can get a two-way dialogue going, which is, I think, the end goal for a lot of projects is to get a dialogue going. We can provide the information, but if the citizens come back, the public come back, go, well, this isn't working, then we can start making some iterations and some changes and hopefully make things better for everyone at the end of the project.
And I think that's such an important thing about all of these citizen science projects, is that at the end of the day, we are all coming together to contribute to larger society, to contribute to the things that are going to impact us all, right? So thank you so much to our special guests for today, for just logging on with us and having this conversation and telling us about the CoCoRaHS project. We appreciate you so much. And thank you all out there in the audience for tuning in with us for another episode of Make It Count Monday. Caroline, is there anything else that you would like to say to the people?
The main thing is see you next week. And thank you so much to Sean for educating us and telling us about that rain gauge sale. I purchased mine, and I'll be taking it with me to my community. I'll be putting it up in my community center or library this fall.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in over there at 4-H. Thanks so much.
All right, bye all.
Bye.